oh, you're having a hard time with this because you are living in sin right now. If you were having within the confines of a marriage, you wouldn't be feeling this way right now. You feel this way because this is God punishing you because you're having and you're not married.
I wish that my younger self could have felt it for what it really was, instead of pinpoint focus in on the fact that what we were doing was a sin. I am in the Bible Belt, if I've not mentioned. I've grown up in the Bible Belt, and my dad was a pastor for many years of my life leading up to me even graduating high school and going to college. And I must say, it has affected me, to say the least. The only thing that's held me back from sharing any of that is, honest to God, just the fear that someone I know in real life might see it, or specifically, God forbid, my family sees it, because I still see my family on a regular basis, and while they know that I'm not really a Christian anymore, we don't really talk about the minutia of what I do believe now and what I disagree with, and that's just kind of not a place that we can healthily go in conversation. And I just want to make it known to everyone, especially my family, if they were to somehow see this, this is not about my family dynamic so much as it is about just the culture that I grew up in, kind of looking back on just growing up in purity culture, growing up in the Bible Belt, growing up in the Baptist church, and having a family very heavily plugged in to ministry. And kind of just thinking back on how a lot of my worldview and self-view have been very much shaped by those things, because I didn't realize for a long time, up until the recent few years, that it's begun to unravel for me and to understand where some of my anxiety and trauma has kind of manifested. And what's pushed me over the edge of feeling a little bit more comfortable to discuss it has been listening through episodes of Ear Biscuits from the last 2 or 3 years. Rhett and Link talking about their deconstruction, and even more specifically, their respective experiences with how the church influenced how they see sex in general, and how that has affected their whole lives, how it's affected them, as two young men growing up whose demeanors were very different from one another, and how the lack of sex education and just the shame wrapped up in it, how that very much manifested itself in their lives. And thankfully for them and their wives, part of their deconstruction has resulted in them being able to detach the shame from sex and be able to embrace a healthier, more fulfilled sex life because of the bridge that your brain develops as a Christian between feeling shame attached to sex instead of pleasure and enjoyment and connection attached to sex, and what it can be. And as someone who, growing up, I legitimately had times where I feel that I was sex phobic. I didn't like people talking about it. I didn't like seeing anything regarding it. It really was a thing that I was very averse to. I would love to ask a therapist why that is. So, a mixture of being inspired to share personal experiences while being respectful of the people in my life and in my stories. I can respect their privacy while also sharing my story that I need to share, because although I'm trying to rewire my brain to be less and less prescriptive when speaking to others or when making videos or anything, just not feeling that compulsion to fill in the cracks with answers, even if they're shitty answers, because I've definitely done that, because my brain looks for systems and answers and rules. It finds comfort in those things. Someone just please tell me what I can and can't do so that I can find peace. Someone just tell me what I'm supposed to do so I can do it and I can, finally calm down. And of course, it doesn't work that way, but that's the way that I'm kind of wired to be. So when I would hear messages in church growing up, my brain wouldn't just absorb the lesson or just the explicit what was being said to me. I would take the implication of what I thought they were saying and take it very seriously and literally and try to apply that across the board. And of course, that makes you very dogmatic. It makes you very judgmental. And I'm not saying it makes everyone become dogmatic and judgmental, but depending on how your brain works and the things that it attempts to cling on to in an attempt to find this false sense of security over and over again, you can find that it can make you a dogmatic and judgmental person if you aren't careful. And by the time that I found myself to be a freshman in college, I had realized something ain't right here. So, like I said, I've been doing some journaling. I started journaling about virginity earlier today because, for one, I don't really think that virginity is a thing. You can run yourself through a few thought experiments, and it may lead you to the conclusion that I came to, which is that virginity is kind of just a term to acknowledge that you have had sex with another person. A lot of people associate this to be, what's the line? Is sex whenever penetration happens or doesn't? Or like, what is it? And, the trump card, I dare say, for that is, well, if, is lesbian sex really sex if they never penetrate one another? Exactly. Long story short, I don't really think that virginity is a thing. I think that it's just, congrats, you had sex with someone for the first time. New experience unlocked. But nothing has changed about you. No one's taken anything away from you. You're not taking anything away from another person. The only way that I think you can take something away from someone sexually is if you choose to breach their consent and do something heinous to them. I'm going to try to be a little bit more forthcoming in the sense that I'm going to be more vulnerable in my storytelling and embarrass myself a little bit while also attempting to very much not make it about whichever partner or person that I'm referencing, because I've dated, I've actually dated quite a few people now that I think about it, and I'm kind of glad that I have dated guys and girls. Whether or not I wanted to admit it at the time, I have been romantically entangled with women before, and didn't realize until years after the fact that not only was I pretty much in a relationship with somebody, but that also I had sex with someone. And like I said, with the whole lesbian sex thing is, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around here, then and the funny thing, my current partner is actually the only person in my life that past my deconstruction I have had relations with in any form or fashion. It's funny because I used to say he's the only person that I've had sex with, and then after some time had passed, I was like, well, what is sex? And when you broaden your mind to what sex is, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I've actually been having sex this whole time. I've just been trying to convince my Christian mind that, well, as long as penetration hasn't happened, then. So realizing that virginity is kind of a silly thing, the idea of sex is a very abstract thing, and just coming to terms with my queerness, not, feeling more tomboy by the minute, and coming to embrace that while also becoming more comfortable with the fact that I'm attracted to pretty much any person that I think is pretty and smart. And I think that that's really cool. But that was not always the case. I remember having a lot of animosity toward gay people only in my private thoughts, because I didn't realize I was bi at the time. But I had a relationship with a girl in high school. And then once we had realized that neither one of our families are going to approve of this, we can't stay together, I went to college and started dating a guy, because that's the only long-term, I knew that I was looking for a long-term partner. I wasn't looking for something that was going to break my heart and rip off eventually. But yeah, when I started college, something happened, because, I had this thought of, I really doubled down on my Christianity because I really felt pressured to go to college, and I didn't know what I wanted to study, and I was already playing a lot of worship music and very heavily involved in church, and I decided to go to a Christian campus and get a degree in Christian ministries. And through this doubling down, I realized, I can't, continue this friendship with this girl, because even though we weren't officially acknowledging that we were dating and together, and we were very good friends, that if I start seeing a dude who I'm like, oh, I could actually date this guy publicly, and we could actually have a relationship and not have to keep it a secret, so that, this convinced me that being gay was a choice, because I had chosen to move on from this girl and to date a guy. And because I'm bisexual, that was possible for me. But if I were a lesbian, and only a lesbian exclusively, then I would have been dipping into a whole different situation of I'm going to try to date this guy and see if I can change my mind and whatever. And that would have been a whole other story to unravel. But it was this mixture of I definitely broke it off for the wrong reasons, but this kind of gave me a confirmation bias of yeah, you can choose to not be gay. I did it. I only did that temporarily, by the way, because eventually there was another girl, don't get me wrong. And it was this cycle of me trying to repress my attraction to girls and being I know that being gay is a choice, and I've just got to keep continuing to make the choice of being straight. I'm going to have these temptations. I'm going to struggle with same-sex attraction. I just got to keep making the decision to be straight. And no matter what I did, I would always find myself in a situation where if I was at a coffee shop and customers would come in, or if I was a waitress and customers would come in, you're meeting, especially in a college town, you're meeting a lot of cute people your age, and I was swooning left and right for girls that I knew that I had no business, in my mind, thinking about like that. So this, of course, led to a great deal of stress and shame. And the funny part is that the guy that I dated immediately after, the guy that I dated, all through college, I never told him that I was ever romantically involved with a girl. I kept it a secret. I was this will be the thing that I take to my grave. This will be the thing that I take to my grave. I can't tell a soul about it. I felt so awful and regret. I was I cannot believe that I cannot let anything like that ever happen again. But what haunted me is that I knew that it didn't feel wrong when it was happening. It felt really pure and natural and good. And looking back now, with all of the filters stripped out of it, I see it as awesome. And I'm glad that it happened, but I hate that it resolved the way that it did. Because I don't really speak to that girl anymore. And it sucks, because I think that we could have been really awesome friends, and that experience shouldn't disqualify from friendship or anything, but that because I had rightfully hurt her by essentially just moving on, right? Because I felt like I had to morally, looking back on it. It was the most pure thing. There are people who are queer who write fan fictions about the experience that I had, like this pureness of like you cultivate this close friendship and you start to feel these things that you've never felt before. And I mustered up the courage to admit it to my best friend of like, hey, this is really embarrassing and I don't know how to talk about this. And I'm really scared that when I tell you this, that you're not going to want to be my friend anymore, and went into this whole spiel. But it was purely based off of the trust that we had built up and the conversations that we had had, that I felt like I have to tell her this, and I have to be okay with whatever she says in response to it. And I bore my soul to this person, and to my absolute surprise, it was completely reciprocated. And like, to express that to somebody, to have it reciprocated, to acknowledge that you're conflicted about how you feel about it, but that you can't deny it, and to like hold hands with that person and to talk about it, and then to actually like give it a try, even though we felt weird about it and weren't sure, like, are we sinning? We were both Christian, and like, we could never tell our parents this. We can't tell anybody at school this. That's really sad. And I've cried some tears about how I wish that my younger self could have felt it for what it really was, instead of just focusing, like pushing out all of the good feelings that were definitely present, so that I could focus in on the fact that what we were doing was a sin. And we were trying to find our way out of it, because we were like, as long as we keep hanging out and as long as we keep like seeing one another, we can't not acknowledge that this chemistry is present. So, of course, when I chose to go to college, because I was a little older, I chose to go to college. That person was a senior then in high school. They had 1 year left to go. I moved on. I made the decision to be like, I'm going to date guys. And bada bing, bada boom. What could have been at the time just, I don't know, what was once a secret that I thought that was my greatest grave secret has turned out to be one of my most cherished memories from high school. It's so pure. And while there are regrets tied to the decisions that I made then, I was just making decisions operating out of the tools that I had, which weren't very many. And although the internet raising me was not the greatest thing at times, one thing that it did give me was just enough exposure to queer people that even though I didn't really know many, there were queer people that I understand now in hindsight. I'm like, there were queer people all around. I just was so sheltered and didn't know, and people don't talk about it, that I didn't know any queer people. And then eventually, once I did know queer people, it was kind of under the guise of like people coming to speak at church and talk about how they had prayed the gay away, or that they were an ex-gay or whatever. And so, this constant exposure to, being told that this is a sin and that you can make the decision to stop, and that, just fear-mongering and propaganda and doctrine. It ultimately came down to doctrine. And, I'm 26 now, and I've really been reflecting on that experience in particular. I'm glad that I can see it better now, and I don't have to feel the shame, and that I one of the first things that I told my current partner when I first got to know him, whenever we started dating, I made it very clear, like, you know already that I'm bi, and while, I'm monogamous and I'm not looking to date multiple people, that I had a relationship that had ended because I eventually admitted to the guy. I was like, hey, we've been together for a while now. I really need you to know that I am bi. This led to a lot of fear and distrust and the assumption that because, oh gosh, I'm not jealous when it comes to other guys, but how could I possibly compete with a girl? You're inevitably going to cheat on me with a girl because I couldn't possibly compete with a girl. Like, just insecurities out the wazoo that wrecked, what was otherwise an okay relationship. And I was so scared that if I didn't just tell the next person that I dated up front, like, I'm bi, are you okay with that? I'm not going to cheat on you. You have to trust me, but I just need you to know, like, that's just a fact about me, right? And that's brought so much, like, I can't even believe how different things are now. I wanted to reference my notes from earlier because I heard Pearl Davis recently. I heard someone quote how she had said that, the most valuable thing that a woman can give a man, it is her virginity.
I wanted to talk about society's biggest problem ever. Now, I want to tell you guys, this problem is so big that it causes everything wrong with society. Non-virgin women. Now, before you shoot the messenger, let me just explain to you why that is. So, essentially, when a woman, let's just put some guys here. So when a woman has sex with a bunch of dudes, what happens next is she can't really bond anymore. So one day she gets married and boom, she's sad married because she misses the guys over here. Some guy, maybe this one, was her favorite. She says, I'm stuck with Bob. I wish I had Chad. Women used to just be unhappy and deal with it. But now we have a society where they say your happiness is so important. And this is why we used to have institutions, social shame, and safeguards to protect women from ourselves. Because when the women are whores, it ruins society. They always say, Pearl, what's your solutions? Well, today, baby, I'm going through them. 1, men should only marry virgins, or men automatically get custody. Because crazy women that leave marriages should not be rewarded. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know your solutions for society. Like the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel. I'll talk to you next time.